World War I, the Great War that changed the world at the dawn of the 20th century, was full of optimism. Nations were industrializing, cities were growing, and science and technology were advancing faster than ever before. But beneath this progress lay tension, competition, and alliances that would soon plunge the world into chaos. The spark that ignited the Great War came on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist seeking independence for his people. What should have been a regional conflict set off a chain reaction across Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the assassination, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia's response didn't satisfy Vienna, Austria-Hungary declared war. Within days, the complex web of alliances pulled more nations into the conflict. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. Russia supported Serbia. France came to Russia's side. When Germany invaded neutral Belgium to reach France, Britain declared war on Germany. By August 1914, Europe was engulfed in war. The world's great powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria, formed the Central Powers. Against them stood the Allied powers, led by Britain, France, and Russia, joined later by Italy, Japan, and eventually the United States. At first, many believed the war would be over in a few months. Young men rushed to enlist, fueled by patriotism and a sense of adventure. But what awaited them was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. In Western Europe, the fighting quickly bogged down into trench warfare. Soldiers dug vast networks of trenches stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Between them lay no man's land, a deadly stretch of mud, barbed wire, and shell craters. The machine gun, artillery, poison gas, and tanks made the battlefield a slaughterhouse. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 stopped the German advance into France, setting the stage for 4 years of stalemate. The Battle of Verdun in 1916 became a symbol of the war-s. Futility, 10 months of relentless fighting that left over 700,000 dead or wounded. The Battle of the Somme, launched by the British the same year, resulted in over 1 million casualties and only a few miles of ground gained. On the Eastern Front, the war was more mobile. Germany and Austria-Hungary fought against Russia's massive armies. Early Russian victories were reversed at the Battle of Tannenberg, where German generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff crushed the Russian Second Army. Millions of soldiers perished. And by 1917, the Russian people were starving and losing faith in their government. The war spread far beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire, joining the Central Powers, fought British forces in the Middle East, in Gallipoli. Allied troops led by future British Prime Minister Winston Churchill tried to capture the Dardanelles Strait but suffered a devastating defeat. In the deserts of Arabia, British officer T. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, helped organize Arab revolts against Ottoman rule. Meanwhile, at sea, the British Navy blockaded Germany, cutting off vital supplies. In response, Germany unleashed U-boats, or submarines, to sink Allied ships. This submarine warfare would eventually draw the United States into the war. When the conflict began, the United States, under President Woodrow Wilson, declared neutrality. Most Americans wanted no part in Europe's struggles. But as the war dragged on, neutrality became harder to maintain. German submarines sank civilian and merchant ships, including the British liner Lusitania in 1915, killing over 1,000 passengers, 128 of them Americans. Then, in early 1917, Britain intercepted the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany tried to persuade Mexico to join the war against the United States in exchange for territory lost in the 19th century. This was the final straw. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. President Wilson told Congress, "The world must be made safe for democracy." American industry shifted into overdrive, supplying weapons, food, and materials to the Allies. The U.S. raised an army of over 4 million men, commanded by General John J. Pershing by 1918. Fresh American troops were arriving in France by the hundreds of thousands. Their presence boosted Allied morale and helped turn the tide. At the Battle of Cantigny and later the Meuse-Argonne offensive, American forces proved decisive. Meanwhile, Germany faced collapse at home. Food shortages, a failing economy, and widespread strikes weakened the war effort. On the Eastern Front, the Russian Revolution in 1917 forced Russia to withdraw from the war, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. But any advantage Germany gained was short-lived. In the fall of 1918, Allied offensives broke through the German lines. One by one, the Central Powers surrendered Bulgaria in September, the Ottoman Empire in October, and Austria-Hungary in early November. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed an armistice ending the fighting. After 4 years of war, more than 16 million soldiers and civilians were dead, and millions more were wounded. The world had been changed forever. In 1919, leaders from the victorious Allied nations gathered in France to draft the Treaty of Versailles. President Wilson brought his vision for a lasting peace. The 14 points and the creation of a League of Nations to prevent future wars. But the treaty placed heavy blame and reparations on Germany, sowing the seeds of resentment that would later lead to World War II. The map of Europe was redrawn. Old empires Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, German, and Russian were gone. New nations like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia emerged. The war had also changed warfare itself, ushering in the age of tanks, aircraft, and chemical weapons. Millions of returning soldiers carried physical and emotional scars. The term shell shock, now known as PTSD, entered the world's vocabulary. The lost generation of the 1920s poets, artists, and thinkers reflected on the devastation and questioned the old ideals of honor and glory. World War I was called the war to end all wars, but history would prove otherwise. Yet its legacy endures in the borders it redrew, the nations it reshaped, and the lessons it taught about the cost of human conflict. More than a century later, the Great War remains a warning. It showed how pride, alliances, and unchecked nationalism can ignite global catastrophe and how peace, once broken, can take generations to rebuild.